we are calling this meeting to order. Do we have to go over any of the Zoom procedures? Or we know
I
everyone?
don't think so. I mean, we have people who are on remotely are people who are usually on these meetings. We've got Doug Zorzy, Alan Goldman, Jim Sheridan, and then Sean's on remotely, and Mike.
Okay. Oh, here's Sean.
There's Mike.
Do we take a vote to approve the agenda, or? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve this agenda?
I will make a motion.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I will second. So that's Sean with
Oh, okay.
the motion and me with a second. Tim with a second.
So then we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, should we consider the minutes? Okay, if anyone wants to make a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, and a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Comments from the chair. I do not have any comments. Aaron, I guess, got stuck in travel delays, so he couldn't be here. I don't think there's anything else to discuss generally. Is anyone here to discuss general business about something not on the agenda? Nope. Oh, work and media has a hand raised. Is that you?
Or is that just a cursor?
Oh, is that your cursor?
Yeah, I think that was just Mike. That's weird. That's not showing on my screen. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think
okay.
it's a weird delay somehow.
All right.
That's just the cursor.
Oh, on that?
Yeah.
No, on that
Okay.
one.
Avoid the confusion.
That is confusing.
That was really funny. I was like, does Orca Media have a comment?
Welcome.
Okay. And then moving on to an update on planning projects and budget items related to planning. Mike, do you want to give this or? Okay. Meredith does not want to give it.
All right, well, I can jump in. So apologies, I can't be there with you. Hopefully my voice holds out for the whole meeting. If not, I'll have to let Meredith go and kind of handle the next piece. So I've been out with COVID, and so I'm just finally starting to get better. But so some of the project stuff we've obviously through the holidays, there wasn't a lot going on, but we did submit the community development block grant disaster recovery today, the pre-application. So that project is continuing to advance. We did get $3 million before the holidays for the Northern Borders grant, so we need about $11 million in infrastructure. And so between these two grants, we'll be able to have all the funding for the infrastructure to Country Club Road. The council is continuing through a subcommittee to advance the RFQ process, the request for qualifications and the request for proposals to get a developer. That is the other piece. So we get the infrastructure to the site. We find a developer who is going to put together a project that the community supports, and then the developer does a lot of the rest of the work on their end. We continue to be a partner with them, but they'll lay out and design the buildings and build and take care of that side. Once we have a letter of agreement with that partner, so that the developer side should be, we'll close the applications in February. So we'll get the proposals from the 5 that we've asked for applications from. We'll get those 5 proposals, and then we will review them, but it'll take some time because there's going to be some public input once we have the proposals, and you as the Planning Commission can also be involved in that and should probably be involved with that to go through and give your thoughts on the 5 proposals. And then eventually the council will make a decision in, I believe, in April. Well, the subcommittee will make a recommendation to the full full city council on who they would recommend we sign a contract with. So those are the 2 pieces. We're trying to get the money for the infrastructure. We're trying to get the developer. Both of those are advancing. And that's most of the big work I think that we've been working on. And then with the budget, a lot of the budget, the only, and I wouldn't even say it's a big thing. We had requested, Meredith works for us on a 0.8 FTE basis. And so we had requested to have that bumped to full-time, which is where it had been in the past. It was many years ago that it was a full-time position. It's worked out fine over the 10 years that it's been at part-time, but we have a lot of demand and a lot of projects that are, after the flood, we have E91, a couple other things, but there's a lot of budget considerations out there. So that was cut back and kept at 0.8, which is disappointing, but there's a lot of budget requests out there. And so the council has to make some decisions. That's the one they did. We requested, and it was the city manager's budget requested $100,000 for the housing trust fund and $50,000 for economic development. The $50,000 for economic development didn't make it. $100,000 for the housing trust fund has remained. So that's, good news. We'll take the wins when we can get them. Those are things that used to be funded in the past on a regular basis, but now had been zeroed out for a couple of years. And so we've gotten some of that back, which is a positive to start being able to move back in a positive direction, because certainly the Housing Trust Fund is an important set of funds. More for the Housing Committee than you guys, but these are ones that impact the department a little bit. So if anyone has any questions, I can certainly answer questions on those or any projects that are going on or on the budget.
How does the request for proposal line up with the state disaster response money, recovery money?
So disaster recovery, so pre-applications were due today. I submitted the city's request today. The full application is due on the 27th of February, I believe. And then they will make a board decision on April 2nd or somewhere thereabouts.
So the fact the city hasn't decided on one of the developers isn't a hang up for the state?
It's the way it was explained to me is that it doesn't exclude us, and it doesn't everything's a scoring, the way things are scored, and if we had a developer, we would score better than being in the process of hiring a developer. But at the same time, this is a very big project, which has a lot of benefits and a lot of support. We already have funding coming in. So we simply can't get there fast enough. And so rather than try to do things and rush things, our decision was that we would be better off to continue on the pace that we're doing, to get the right developer and just explain that in our application and explain that to the board. Other projects, we'll talk about like Prospect Heights. That's another one people hear a lot about for Barry. I think it's Barry Town or Barry City. There's a Prospect Heights project. They got DR funding. They did not have a developer on board yet. So these happen, and it just depends on the project and your scoring, but it doesn't exclude us by not having our developer yet. We're going to be kind of moving them on parallel paths.
Okay, thanks for the update, Mike.
Mike, I was going to go back to you said there would be public input for the applications received. And I was wondering if the commission thought if we review the applications and we all kind of liked one over the others, whether you guys would be into us drafting a letter to city council, just like stating our preference. Do you guys think that's appropriate or?
No, I think that's great. Would we have to have a special meeting? Will the timing line up?
It seems like there's plenty of time because if the applications are all in by February and the decision isn't until April, so it seems like there's enough time for us to look it over and see if we all agree. You think so too?
Yeah, I would imagine there would be time, and we can. I think the challenge would be you as a commission might need to figure out if you have questions. It might be something you may have to work into one of the other public input sessions, because I think they're going to have a certain amount of public input opportunities and questions. I don't think I can have all 5 applicants come and meet with you in a planning commission meeting per se, but I think you can see all the applications and then either have a subcommittee of the planning commission or the whole planning commission assemble some questions that could then be presented to them individually, either in writing to respond or to go to one of those public hearings where they're going to have a presentation.
Okay. That sounds good. Any other questions? Well,
Yeah, where's the Regional Planning Commission stand with its map? Do you have any idea on our land use map for Central Vermont?
So I did speak with them before the holidays, and they had initially tried to want to get their map in December and then get that approved and then kind of do 2 processes, two approvals, approve that. And then because the RPC plan expires next year, then do another readoption after that. And at a certain point, they said the timing just isn't lining up. So they're going to just do it all at once. So they're going to do that, I believe, in April or May with the proposal. So the map has been delayed a couple of months, but the overall end point would basically end up being about the same anyways, because they're going to do the map and then and then kind of put them together. Instead, they're just going to do it all in one step. So we're hoping we'll have it more in the summertime, where then we would be eligible for the Tier 1A or Tier 1B, whatever the city wants to go for.
Is that map continuing to change? Is it dynamic, or is it sort of settled at this point from our end?
Well, our future land use map is in our city plan, and so we already have ours, and ours is static, and they're using the information in that to help them develop their map.
Got it.
But they've got rules. Well, you're familiar with that, Tim. They've got a set of rules that they have to follow to kind of create it, which are the exact same rules we used when we created our map, because we grabbed the RPC rules to create our map, so we would know kind of what it would look like. So we're not surprised that we're kind of ending up at the same point, because we both followed the same, the same map, and ended up in the same place.
Great.
Any more questions? No? Okay, so we're going to move forward to reviewing chapter 320 today. Between Mike and Meredith, do you guys know who's taking this on?
Mike, do you feel comfortable starting? I hadn't actually prepped to do this, but I'm familiar enough with it to just talk about it. It's up to you. How do you feel with your voice?
We'll go as long as my voice kind of holds out here. So I'm gonna share my screen somewhere here.
Alan has his hand raised.
Oh,
All
hold on.
right. Oh.
Alan has his hand raised.
Alan has a quick question.
That
Okay.
might have something to do with what we were just discussing before.
You're gonna need to unmute yourself, Alan.
Okay. I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Good evening. Hi, everybody. How are you?
Great, thanks.
Hey, I just was, as we're getting into this, I'm just looking, let me get down to that 320. I was just going to ask Mike and Meredith on the 3201A, because it's the very first line, to just hopefully give me a little bit of clarity what your understanding is. So as we proceed through the evening, I'll understand it correctly. It says all development shall meet the requirements of this chapter except parcels. So I didn't know if that's singular or possessive, used for 1 or 2 dwelling units. I was just going to ask if Meredith and Mike, if you could one of you please explain what the intent of that line is, and then I think I'm ready to go on to the rest of the night. Thank you.
I can do this, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So that's in relation to the uses that are occurring on a parcel. So if a parcel has a single family dwelling unit on it or 2 dwelling units, then chapter 320 doesn't apply. Any other uses that are, happening on a parcel, so not a vacant parcel, but if you've got actual uses going on a parcel that you're either getting permits for, or it's, never had permits, but they've been there historically, if you're making changes on that parcel, either to use or structurally, any of those, then you have to look to these chapter 320 provisions. But otherwise, if it's a single family home, if it's two dwellings on a parcel, then this doesn't apply. So this is where the landscaping and the lighting standards are. There's multiple things in here, but that don't apply to parcels that have just a single family home or 2 dwelling units in any makeup.
But I would add in that I think Alan is correct that we should, from a wordsmithing standpoint, I think that should read all development shall meet requirements of this chapter except would it be any parcel or a parcel used for 1 or 2 units, because if you had 2 parcels side by side that you owned, we're not looking at both parcels. We're not looking at multiple parcels. We look at each individual parcel.
Yeah. And so that's a typo on that front.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, folks.
So, all right. So this first section, 3201, really is kind of the umbrella applicability for the whole chapter 320. It helps us to make the decisions between whether something is a major site plan and then it has to go through DRB, whereas a minor plan that Meredith can review. And point B is those criteria that say what needs to go to the DRB. The rest, if it trips any one of these, then it goes to the DRB. This is an area that you, as a planning commission, we can talk about. We get to talk with developers about what adjustments we may or may not want to make to these requirements to make more things administrative and less things have to go to the DRB. We have that conversation a lot. We already went through at the last set of amendments that we passed to make parcels used for non-residential uses as well as residential uses of more than 6 units. That was a change we just made. It used to say 2 units. So now if you're doing 4 units, it's going to be a minor site plan unless you're creating 10 parking spaces or something like that. So so that's the basic piece with that. Do you have any questions on kind of what's in here? But this is certainly going to be an opportunity. We'll come back to this section when we get done with everything and we come back and say, okay, what changes do we want to make? I would expect that we'll be back talking about this.
Mike, is major renovations defined anywhere? Like that, I feel like B is, vague. Unless it's defined somewhere.
It's defined. Personally, I don't feel like it's defined particularly well.
Okay, there you go.
I think there's been one major renovation application that tripped something over to the DRB since I've been here.
Okay.
And it's a hard one to make. There's not like a bright line on it.
Right. I mean, everything else has like numbers involved.
Mhm.
And then B is just major renovations, and it's kind of like someone's major could be someone else's minor.
Yeah.
It's
No,
just-
we have a definition in the definition section,
Mhm.
but it's not great.
Okay.
So, oh, go ahead.
I have a couple questions. Am I reading this correctly? Therefore, that so where it says used for 1 or 2 dwelling units at the top as the exceptions, and then jump down to 3201B1, and where we made the change of up more than 6 dwelling units. Then the in between, which would be a 3 unit, 4 unit, or 5 unit, falls into 3201B2, which is all other applications shall require minor site plan review. Okay. Yep.
Yes.
Great. Following. All right. Then my second question was that in B1F, cumulative net of greater than 2,000 square feet of new impervious surface. Cumulative net includes the structure itself as well, right? So we have, it looks like 2,000 square feet, construction of an accessory structure, 2,000 square feet, construction of an addition of more than 2,000 square feet, and cumulative net of 2,000 square feet. So it could be the structure up to 2,000 square feet. It could be addition up to 2,000 square feet, or it could be like a driveway, for instance, that would cover 2,000 square feet.
Yes.
Great.
And I've also had situations where somebody does a very small addition on a house that partly covers what was a driveway and also then adds other impervious surface on the parcel. And
Yeah.
that's why coming up to that cumulative net, because it might be they're just changing what where the impervious surface is on the parcel.
Yep.
And so for me, on an equity basis, if you're just changing where it is, but you're actually improving the location, like it's putting the impervious in a better location, having that trigger them over into major site plan
Yeah.
felt really unfair. And so I can't remember which round of changes we actually made that definition switch to this cumulative net. Because it felt like more of what was trying to be captured.
Yeah. Yep. Great.
All right, so the next section on bike and pedestrian access and circulation. This is one that both Meredith and I know needs some work. So this is one that we'll work with DPW and work with you to come up with some better language. Since we wrote this in 2017, 2018, when it was adopted, we knew a lot of the site plan rules needed to be fixed. And we went through and over the years, fix the landscaping and fix the lighting, and you'll see as we go through. This is one that hadn't been fixed, and it needs some additional work to go into it. Oh, the other piece, stepping back a little bit to the previous section on the classifications, you'll also know between major and minor, it's not just whether you go to the DRB or not. There's also major site plans are going to have higher standards or additional standards that minor site plans will not. And you'll see some of this come back later on. Doesn't make a difference in the bike and pedestrian, but it will later on. I did want to make that point. You'll see it come up later. So for example, on the issues with the bike and pedestrian, if you just read this one, bicycle access and storage may be required in accordance with the following. And then, will bicycle access be required? And it just says if bicycle racks are required. It doesn't actually say where they're required. It just says if they're required, then they have to meet these standards. And then the requirement is if they're required, then they shall be located within 200 feet of an entrance. We really need to have something in there to actually say projects of a certain size or projects of a certain type or scale or in certain districts, whatever it is. If we're going to say there's standards, we actually have to have some standards. So this is a poorly constructed set of requirements that really just need to be fixed. The development review board may require sites with high traffic to incorporate designated bike lanes or other paths and those types of information. So if it's a major site plan, we should probably just go through and say that rather than say the development review board may require, we should probably go through and say major site plans shall meet this requirement, minor site plans shall meet this requirement. But that's one. And you'll also notice there's not very much structure. When we get to the next section, you'll be like, oh, yeah, it's missing the purpose statement. It's missing the applicability statement. It's missing the, this doesn't follow the same ones that you'll see coming up. So pedestrian access. So this talks about public sidewalks. If there's a public sidewalk terminating, what we want to do actually in this section on public sidewalks is to relate it back to our, we have a complete streets plan that says what streets should have sidewalks and what streets don't need sidewalks. And rather than say, well, if there's a sidewalk that comes up to your property, then you need to extend the sidewalk. Maybe not. If that street didn't require a sidewalk, then you shouldn't be required to extend the sidewalk. But those are the different situations that we should clean on this section, is make sure our public sidewalks meet the complete streets plan, which says where we should have sidewalks. And if you should have a sidewalk and the sidewalk terminates at your property line, you should have to build that. And that's also going to be a question. This will be a question that adds costs to projects. And is this something that we want to continue to have as a requirement? Usually our grant funders and others want us to have this type of language in it. So they want us to be able to go through and say, if you've got a project, those should be built in. At the same time, there's an argument to say, if this street should have a sidewalk, shouldn't the community, we as the community are saying there should be a sidewalk on this street. In which case, shouldn't everybody in the community bear the cost of putting in what we know is an insufficient sidewalk? That's different than a situation where this street does not need a sidewalk, but this project is so big that it now triggers and warrants a sidewalk that otherwise wouldn't be necessary. If you didn't build your project, we wouldn't need a sidewalk here. But now that you are, you do. In that case, many communities will say, in that case, you have to carry those costs. So there are different ways, but we need to kind of evaluate that as planning commission, housing developers, to make sure that we match it. But we do want to make sure, above all else, we match it to our complete streets plan, because we don't want to be requiring people to be extending sidewalks on roads that we say there's no sidewalk warranted here. We
Just
shouldn't be
a quick
putting that in.
comment, an example, right? Like Isabel Circle, right? I mean, DPW does not want to deal with the sidewalk. There's no other sidewalk. I mean, and never mind like the hundreds of thousands of dollars it would save to not have a sidewalk where there's no other sidewalk. But think of an HOA, they will not, they're like, the only way you're getting a permit is if you write in this, like, whatever, we're not responsible for plowing it. So think of the cost of all the HOA fees that, okay, we have to have some private person come up here and plow a sidewalk that nobody wanted to begin with, but it was in our code. Anyway, thank you, Mike. Complete streets
Yes.
reference would be really good.
Yes, and these are things that come out when you have a housing project that starts to get built, and you're like, that's actually not really consistent with what we want or need. But we should have this conversation when we get to March. So this is one we're going to flag. As I said, almost all of this, I think we had something with bike and pedestrian access that we were having some issues. Maybe it was somewhere else, and Meredith would jump in and tell me about making sure it addresses residential as well as commercial, because it used to be worded only for commercial or something like that.
I think that's a different standard.
Different standard. Okay. So yeah, internal walkways, this we want to keep. This just says if you've got sidewalks and you have a commercial or residential building, you should have some path that connects you to the sidewalk. And that makes sense. I think we've all been in places where you've got to walk through the driveway to get to the property. And if you're building something, remember, this isn't small. This is something of some substance and size. If you're building a bigger project, that you would be able to walk and have a pedestrian access up to that building. And same with large parking areas. If you have large parking areas, you should have some internal walkways. So that's it for O2. There aren't too many questions. I can jump up to O3. And this is one that we made a lot of improvements to. Landscaping and screening. And you'll see this is the way we want them to look, to have a purpose statement, have applicability, which means who has to meet this requirement. Are there any special rules or administrative rules, the planting specifications? So we really went through and did, and again, this is where you can get a lot of pushback from people saying, there's too much here, it's too big. But actually, when you get through and walk through it, this is why Meredith can now enforce these administratively, because once you read it and understand it, it's really logical, and you can kind of walk your way right through it. And Meredith can help get through these things. And we have requirements for specific things. If you've got a parking lot over a certain size, you have to have a parking lot, landscaping. There's street trees, there's general landscaping. That's parking, screening, building equipment, service areas, non-conformity, total site landscaping. This usually only comes in when you've got a much bigger project. If you've got a Caledonia Spirits, you're going to be talking about these total landscaping. And we allow how you count things. You can double count them. The planting specifications, how big does a tree have to be? The minimum planting area. So if you want to plant a big tree, we want that, but you have to at least have 100 square feet. So that way you don't end up with a big tree in an area where it can't thrive, it can't survive because it's not big enough. And we reviewed these standards with actual landscape and tree experts to make sure that these were appropriate and easy to enforce. And again, it's kind of a little, there's a lot here, but it also all works together. And I think Meredith could probably comment on that. She has to review these a lot, but I think they really are pretty straightforward once you get into them. And they've worked quite well since we've updated them. And I'll let Meredith kind of fill in if any comments on the specifics. I don't use it every day.
Yeah, I mean, this one really doesn't cause too many issues. Like Mike said, since we got it cleaned up. And there are standards here that these apply whether it's minor site plan or major site plan. So the general screening standards, the total site landscaping actually applies for whether it's minor or major site plan. So once you're over the 2 dwelling units on a parcel, I start looking at landscaping, but it's because so many different things can be counted for that total square feet of landscaping on a parcel. And the ratio to make that calculation isn't that high. It hasn't been an issue with too many people. It's really closer to downtown, like in the Riverfront District, over on Granite Shed Lane. Those are places where you've got really big buildings on parcels that have really big parking lots, where suddenly if somebody starts trying to build something new, you might need to start asking somebody to convert some things to green space and plant more things. It depends if there's it depends on how much the
Like the
project
federal
costs.
building, right? If they redid the federal building downtown,
Right, but so that's already all impervious.
let's say.
And you're in UC1, right? You're in UC1, but I mean, there are some places to have some exemptions, but usually those have to do with that the cost of the project is so small. You can get in and have just a small percentage of the total value of the project be required putting in new landscaping. When the prior hotel was originally approved under pre-2018 stuff, but the revamped garage was the new standards. They had to do some form of landscaping. But they were able to do that.
Could the DRB have waived that though?
There is not, so a waiver lets you have a little bit of a change.
Uh-huh.
A variance would be you don't get to have to do it at all.
Okay.
So the DRB has the ability, as it says, to waive the amount and placement standards.
They have to do
The waiver requested creates the minimum variance from the standard. And so you have to otherwise like try to comply. Maybe if you have natural features that cause the problem, then that gives you more discretion because it's something outside of the applicant's control. Previously existing nonconformities that can give you some leeway, but this was put in, my understanding is this was put in really as an intention to try and stop having parcels that were just fully paved, especially when the parking standards, the required, parking spaces and stuff got reduced a whole lot. And try and add more shade trees to sidewalks, things like that. So it's, there's a balance, and it balances with the stormwater requirements too, right? So you add some green space to help you meet the stormwater requirements. You can count that as landscaping toward the landscaping total. So far it's worked well.
I have a question about, so piggybacking what Gabe was saying, if somehow we were able to convert one of our parking lots downtown into like a 4-story structure, would they have to satisfy like?
Yeah.
So my issue, my issue is that I feel like currently the way State Street and Main Street are built, they do not satisfy these requirements. Because back when they were built, they weren't required to put in landscaping. But now that if a new building is going in that would have these landscaping requirements, we're kind of forcing buildings to be less dense than our existing urban core.
So actually, I'm going back in. So UC1 is actually exempt from the total site landscaping,
Okay.
which reminds it, and that got added, I think, but that's just the total site landscaping. So they'd still need to comply. If it was a big new building, they would still need to comply with the parking lot landscaping that would come into play, right? Or street trees. I forgot that the
Yeah,
total.
unless they didn't have any parking or the
Right, if
parking
they
was
didn't
under
have
the
a parking
building.
lot, but I mean, if they're on, and the street trees is a funky one, but so there's the
So
total
Urban
site
Center 1 does not
landscaping
have
of
these.
UC1 doesn't apply, but you're still gonna have other things that are gonna require plantings.
Okay.
So, but the total, I forgot about that, the UC1, because like I
But
said,
UC2 does.
UCT, yeah, it applies to UC2.
I know. I feel like this goes back to like our thoughts about like upzoning, the kind of like letting the city kind of expand outward, you know,
Yep.
like expanding UC1 to incorporate more of what's currently UC2.
So something to throw in, right? Just to factor in, street trees can be planted in the public right of way if you have agreement
Right.
with the city. And yet you're still not then just creating new sidewalks, pavement, or whatever that don't have any shade.
Right.
So that gives some leeway where those can, I mean, it ends up being controlled by the city still because it's in the public right of way, but that those can count towards your street trees.
Right. It's like there's like the one requirement about screening between residential and non-residential uses. Like you can see how
That have to be plantings. That can be of any type of screening. And again, I think I'm trying to remember the screening. So we've had what 2 things in downtown that had to go through this. So the building that was proposed to go in front of the Thrush didn't have to worry about the screening.
Thrush.
Sorry, to me it's a Thrush Tavern.
Faux capital.
Faux Capital. So
Okay.
that's
Is that UC2?
no, that's UC1.
It is? Okay.
Yep. So again, so like I said, I'm not really familiar with these
Yeah.
elects. They don't come into play. So street trees again, actually doesn't apply in UC1 or rural districts. We didn't dig into the details when we went through this. The parking landscaping. Parking landscaping still applies, but that's
Yes.
where major site plan approval, where there's existing or proposed parking of more than 10 spaces, and there's no minimum, there's no requirement that you have on-site
Yeah.
parking in UC1.
Right.
So,
So
And keep in mind there are the non-conformities requirement is in here that says that if the property is non-conforming with respect to the landscaping, that to come into compliance, we can't require more than 5% of the project cost. So it's capped by amount of cost. So in certain cases, you're not going to be able to, but we're going to have you do something. And the cost can't be more than a certain percentage.
yeah, I mean, there's lots of room to make adjustments, right? There's
Yeah.
places to say, we don't want it to just be UC1, we want it UC1 and UC2. Where some of these exemptions apply. There's definitely room for that. You just as being somebody who also staffs Historic Preservation Commission, right? I'm not
Right.
saying that the goal isn't a good one. I am just flagging that there would probably be pushback. So expanding that out to those districts where you do have more of the older trees, the bigger trees, right? Things like that. If you're taking away those protections
Okay.
and trying to balance that with thoughts of how are you dealing with stormwater, those things, right?
Mhm.
Where that is all flowing down into town, right? We're at the low spot. The UC1
Oh
to
yeah.
UC2.
Yeah, I mean, but the lot in front of Capitol or Folk Capitol is currently completely paved. So
But
it's not like,
but that one is UC one.
know.
That was exempt from
Right.
those, right?
that's why I just want to make
But
sure
the
that what's
number-
currently built, if we could like recreate what's currently built.
Yeah, I mean, they were planning
That would
the
be
landscaping,
allowed.
but it was minimal because it was already all impervious.
Right.
I mean, this may apply just to this or maybe other sections. I'm sure there's a planning term for this, but I've done some projects with my brother in Dover, New Hampshire. If you're gonna like be at variance from what they want, you basically throw money into a fund that they can plant trees someplace else or something, right? It's like, I don't know what that's called, but there's like a provision to do that.
Yeah, and we don't have anything like that in here where you can plant it on another parcel. When it comes to in the regulations,
Because
because
you're saying that could be something that
Offset.
if we're like, oh, we really want more green space, maybe we have a fund where it's like, oh. Again, I just really think of the federal
Yep.
building.
It is possible for offsite mitigation. That is a possibility that it would have to get written in. It doesn't exist anywhere at this time, but that is something under Vermont law we could have that type of offsite mitigation, just like we have offsite parking. If you can't fit the parking on your parcel, well, you can purchase the right to park
Elsewhere.
on your neighbor's property to meet your parking requirement, as long as there's meets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could do the same thing here to have either a fund or some other way of accommodating that requirement.
I'll just jump in and say I think creative thinking around this is really interesting. And looking at the map right here, UC1 does extend East State Street into with all the state buildings. UC2 is the first stretch of Barry, and UC3 is the more historical section north on Main Street. Can we envision those UC2, UC3 having similar density as the rest of downtown as UC1? What does that look like? What does it entail? I think Meredith is suggesting there would be quite a bit of pushback. I agree with that. And at the same time, I think it's worth thinking about. And that process, in my mind, looks like a potential combining of zoning districts.
Right, which is also something we're gonna come back and look at.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are there questions about any other? I mean, I know the landscaping has a lot in it, because there are a lot of different factors and times when things wanted to come into play. I think the screening is the one that gets used the most, but is also one of the easiest to find workarounds. In a lot of ways.
Lots of very defined, like it's just, if you're trying to come in and figure it out, it's like very spelled out, right? So.
Yeah. And it's also saying it's not that you're trying to make it so you can't see it at all. It's adding some sort of visual break. But yeah, let me.
I'm a little bit curious about, like, I wasn't paying attention to the commission and the development of Caledonia Spirits. I'm just kind of peripheral to it happening. We were here. Like, in that process, any sense of, from your perspective, like what came up from a planning department? Any sort of were there complications with the developers that they were pushing back on? I'm not sure how much you can speak to that. But that was a big development.
They got their permits before I got hired.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember if that was. Mike, do you remember if they got I think they got their permits under the pre-2018 rules.
Caledonia Spirits?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that was the pre-2018 rules, but I've worked with them since on both closing out that initial work.
Yeah.
But also amendments where suddenly these modern requirements kicked in. I've found them great to work with.
Yeah.
And, everything seems to have been in compliance. I don't think, I mean, it's hard because I also came in and then suddenly we were doing all the revised hotel and garage work. So
Sure.
that kind of consumes my memory of the first like year and a
Yeah.
half.
Well, that would have been a better example to bring up if it had actually gotten built, maybe.
But they, I mean, Caledonia Spirits, all seems to be working quite well. And like I said, they've come back for changes and amendments under the current regulations that have all seemed to be working.
Yeah, I just always find it really helpful to have real world applications of these regulations.
Yeah. I mean, the landscaping get applied all the time. You know, I have, there's projects with, 3 units or 4 units, where we have to require landscaping, or somebody comes and says, hey, I want to make these changes. I'm like, well, okay, let's look in tell me what the species are that you're proposing. Tell me where you're planting them. Is there enough area? And so far they've all worked pretty well.
Yeah.
The addition behind Gary Home, they needed to take down some trees and put in new ones to then meet the total site landscaping, because they have a lot of impervious there, and they expanded the amount of impervious they have with
Sure.
the addition. And they were able to meet all of that.
Yep.
In a pretty tight space there in
It is.
UC2.
Yeah. UC2, right.
So are we on lighting?
Hmm?
Are we on lighting? Where are we at?
We received comments about 3203C2 about requiring a licensed landscape architect, certified horticulturist. That was like back months ago when we were seeking comment from people that came up. That it shouldn't be required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a comment to expand, if I remember correctly. Who can provide that information? And it wasn't by just anyone,
Right,
but I think
Sarah Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. Sarah, did we already make that change? And one of these terms is the new one, or so it's 3023C2, or was that one to do with the next round?
I'm pretty sure it was the next round.
Yeah, because I think Sarah made a
Yeah, it's still there as a requirement. It was gonna adjust it.
there was another specific licensure certification or something that she was throwing in as an option.
I'm seeing a document that has a matrix of information. So this is line 35 of that document. Either eliminate specific professional requirements for landscaping plans and lighting plans, or broaden what professionals may provide the plans. For landscaping, change list those with advanced degrees in landscape design, landscape architecture, or urban planning.
Yep.
That's the text there.
Thank you.
Because the reality is, as we've already pointed out, you can go through and meet these requirements without, because they're pretty much laid out what you have to do. You don't actually have to have a degree to meet that. But if you have that degree, then it gives you a level of understanding, or level of understanding that you have a level of competence about meeting the requirements too.
Just as a little administrative staffer plug, I will also say that when it's already a major site plan, so you already have a lot more things to review and to make sure are all consistent and match up, having where I am just not going to have as much time to go through everything. I try to make sure everything is as complete as possible before it goes to the DRB. If it is a profession, somebody in the profession who's put together that landscape design, there's a lot less of me having to go back and forth and tell people they have to keep adding things or changing things, or something's not correct according to the standards in here, and that all the information is there so that it's easier to pass it on to the board and the board to review it. And that it's then consistent with the other work. So,
Have we talked
but-
about, like, I think, I didn't realize this, Tim, you kind of brought it up at the very opening paragraph, right? That there's sort of like 3, 4, 5 units are kind of slipping into, you know, the site plan review. And I think about like this idea of, oh, I made an adjustment and now all of a sudden this was cool under the old rules, but now I have these new rules. Have we ever talked about like just exempting them up to 6 units?
well, so up to in that minor site plan,
Yeah.
somebody can get me a copy of their printout from the assessor's map with the satellite imagery on it and draw on what their stuff
It's
is.
fine.
I have had people come in, sit down with me, and we're highlighting stuff in different colors. So minor site plan landscape review, I can I mean, it takes time. And I'm double checking and having them come to me, you know, like double checking stuff, but minor site plan, usually it's not, you know, I just need a landscape plan. I need something that lists out what you're planting, where you're planting it, and we go from there. It's like it says, it doesn't have that professional requirement.
Okay.
I work with people on those. What I'm saying is when we hit these major projects, that's when, for me, I will say that having a professional one does make, I think, my job and the board's job easier, because usually landscaping is a box to check, but we need to be able to check it, because once you hit major, that's also when other factors come in. So if you start getting rid of these other requirements for major site plan, and we don't have to look at street trees and all these other things, then it's not as necessary to have that more detailed and particular plan. But those are also the projects that are under more scrutiny, where you're more apt to have somebody come and appeal it and say you didn't have enough information to back up the finding.
I think the people that came to us were just saying that it was so cost prohibitive, you know, to get that, whatever. I mean, it's like
And that's why it's,
licensed
yeah.
landscape architect, horticulture, you know?
Yeah, oh,
the whole
yes.
stream of words. Whereas if it's someone who is a professional landscape architect, they may not have all of these other requirements, but they could still satisfy what you and the DRB need.
Yeah.
Which I think is their point.
Yeah. And like, you know, that was also the expansion of what falls under the minor site plan. So that the projects are on the smaller range, smaller side, where your margins are probably a lot smaller.
Yeah. Okay. Does
So-
anyone else have any questions about landscaping? I never thought I'd say those words. All right, moving
So
on.
we'll be back. There's going to be a lot for there. But I think similarly, outdoor lighting is another one where we've had a lot of work with it. When you read through it, you kind of give this little glazed, oh my God, look. But actually, kind of when you go through and you walk through it, it actually kind of works. There's some special lighting for certain things, recreation facilities, car dealerships, fueling stations, security lighting. But really a lot of it, for the most part, most don't get anywhere near these thresholds. You really have to be having something that's kind of getting above and beyond to start getting in where these start being tricky to meet either the fixture shielding lamp type or the total lumen outputs. But again, Meredith uses these a lot more, but I think for the most part, these are pretty straightforward. I don't know if these are everybody or just major site plans.
There's a major site plan trigger where you have to have a qualified professional lighting designer engineer be the one to do the lighting plan.
Yep.
Which actually is kind of funny because their standards are to do everything by foot candles, which we don't care about. And so a lot of times they'll have a professional do it and then I have to send it back and tell them, no, I need all the lumen numbers. this one, like, I'm not sure I've ever had a residential project have a problem with meeting the minimums. It's usually more the commercial ones where they've got, stand lights out in the parking lot, plus lights all the way around the building, plus lights for their signs. Those are the ones where I've had issues where someone has too much light being emitted from their parcel.
I will just say there are residential buildings that get, like even if they're meeting these standards, the neighbors are not happy.
I'm not talking about neighbors. Neighbors are a whole other thing.
Yeah, usually the one we had a residential complaint, but what that one came back down to was the fact that the lighting that was installed, somebody installed lighting without a permit, and the lighting was the wrong temperature. And so when we had them convert it to a warmer lamp, the neighbors were like, "That's fine, that's good." And it's kind of like it's quoted too bright. Well, it's not actually too bright. It's a too cool of a light. Cool light has much brighter, but that's why the requirements are what they are. If you actually put in the correct light, it doesn't affect the neighbors.
I don't know if is Gabe's microphone on? Because Mike's just
Mike, I'm just saying, I would just say that neighbors, you can comply with this and they are not happy, however cool or warm or whatever it is. It's just,
Because it's too much light?
they just don't like it. And they call Meredith. They probably call the police. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yours didn't go to an appeal at the DRB.
No, it didn't.
So that's in here. There's options for like putting things on timers, having them be on motion sensors. So we've been able to find solutions for a lot of these, and sometimes it's also like, well, it complies with the standards.
Right.
Sorry, plant a tree. Like, sorry
You're saying
about
this
that.
to the neighbor.
Yeah,
Plant a tree.
where sometimes I'm like,
That's just too much.
our regulations have what they have, right? They have requirements for shielding, especially if you have lighting on the side of a house near another house, right? There's options. There's even things in here. We did have one that came up, an enforcement thing where a newer business in a more residential area had big windows, and the business was having people come in and working at late hours, and they didn't have shielding, and the lights were low enough, they were going through their big windows, and residential houses nearby were having issues with them. So there is actually a standard in here for those kinds of lights where they are below the tops of the windows, so that light emits out through the windows a lot. And this is for a commercial business, right, in a residential area. So I did have to deal with that and had to make them put like shades on the windows that were headed towards those residences when they were for at night. But again, residential development has been able to meet these standards. Those haven't been a big issue. If you're really focused in on the residential in this go around.
So we've got only a couple of these that are left. One is outdoor seating, display, and storage. I don't know how much this comes up, but it's really just trying to look at those Aubuchons, outdoor storage, outdoor seating, outdoor display. So if you've got something that has that outdoor, still on your private property, but outside, it's got some rules and regulations to guide those.
And this is specifically all commercial, right? It's specifically for seating and service for patrons, right?
Yep.
Outdoor and the display of retail goods, wares, merchandise, all three of these, it has to do with commercial stuff. It's not going to come into play for residential.
I have just a quick question. So are inns and bed and breakfasts commercial in this instance?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're what do we call it? Lodging. So they're
Right.
not residential.
Okay. Because in our former B&B house, we have lighting up the wazoo, and now I know why. There's just exterior lights everywhere. Yes.
Yes. So if you were to go to change those fixtures, technically you're supposed to come because if you're gonna change the fixtures and it triggers a building permit, you probably also have to be reviewed for whether, especially if it's in design review.
Mm-hmm.
If you change the fixtures, you have to go through design review, and like shielding and stuff would apply because it triggers a zoning permit.
It's just funny because like right now, I think it's the too bright category. If anything, we would be dimming them.
Yeah.
But it'd be
Make
less
changes.
hassle to keep it as like a.
Well, but it's also, I mean, yeah, but the standards also have a lot of recommendations and suggestions and ways to keep it
Mhm.
good for the
I'm not gonna
neighbors
miss a bit.
and still be effective. But
We'll just keep it as is. We like it for parties. Poor Meredith.
But your structure isn't commercial anymore. I'm just curious how that.
I mean,
Well, I think we're still zoned mixed. Like it's a mixed
Zoned
use.
mixed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the street I think
but-
is mixed use.
Usage is.
yeah, but it's how you're using the building,
Mhm.
right? If you haven't used it as
It's a business.
actually, if you haven't used it as a bed and breakfast
Right.
for over a year,
Oh no.
that use expires. It's only the residential uses that can be restarted without getting a new zoning permit.
It gets complicated, Meredith. You know it does.
It does. They come and talk to us.
You know it gets complicated. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know how you keep this all in your head.
Come and talk to, because I've been doing this, it feels like a really long
We
time
haven't
now.
changing anything, so.
You can still come talk to us.
Okay.
It does, we don't charge you to come and talk to us or
Okay.
email us or anything.
Neighborhood planning.
We're here to help you.
Okay. We're good. So moving on to outward displays. So even the B&B at the time would have had to satisfy like outdoor seating requirements.
I mean, I don't think anybody has ever, that's not like a where you're serving them, right? So the outdoor seating for my brain, for like a restaurant, right? Where it's on their parcel needs to meet that requirement. Because they're serving patrons there.
Okay.
If you have just chairs in your backyard for people to come and sit in and enjoy,
It's like incidental.
yeah, that's not, that's not a service area where
Okay.
you're coming out and serving them food or
Do we need to insert like for commercial uses into applicability
Mm.
so nobody gets confused? 3205
so I'm just,
Like A.
apply to commercial outdoor, you know. Anyway, that's getting
Yeah,
in the
we
weeds.
could-
I know that's not what we're doing right now.
yeah, well, I mean, it's something to think about. Yeah, so outdoor seating and service areas shall be level and surfaced with asphalt, concrete, or other suitable all-weather material. So just chairs and like the green space aren't going to count, right? We're not talking like a bench in the yard. It's really, I mean, we could more carefully define what this means, but it also says, you know, the DRB may place limits on the hours outdoor seating and service areas may be used. It's really looking at restaurants and bars in
Yeah, I mean,
large part.
Patrons, I mean, it sounds commercial, but I'm just saying maybe we insert that so it's just very clear.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's not a bad idea, especially for that one. I mean, the outdoors display, I think, is pretty obvious. Display of retail goods, wares, and
Yeah.
merchandise.
Yeah.
And outdoor storage again is pretty clear, I think. Although that one, actually, outdoor storage isn't just, that's also unregistered vehicles. That one's not just commercial necessarily.
But yeah, I think a couple definitions could help.
Yeah.
But again, you can see this one, you saw how the other ones were all put together and laid out and talk about nonconformities and talk about waivers and all of these things. But there were a couple of sections. We talked about bike and access, outdoor seating and display. This is still kind of goes back to the language that our consultant gave us in 2016, 2015, 2014. We've made some adjustments to it to make it work, but it doesn't really follow the format. This would not be a priority when we don't have a lot of time. But it certainly eventually we would want to go and build this one out to make sure that it kind of matches the other formats. And that would probably help us to make sure that we're doing a better job of making those terms very clear that Gabe is pointing out. And I think this could be better, but this works for the most part. But
So I have another question about the timing, because this whole section is for when there's a new development happening or a change is happening
Yeah.
to an existing parcel.
Right.
But it seems that these, like the outdoor display, outdoor storage, like you use Abishan as an example, they're never coming to you with a new development for their existing store. So this outdoor storage doesn't apply to them because,
It's because they've been doing that for so long.
yep,
It's an existing nonconformity,
okay,
right? It's an existing nonconformity. And so you go back to the nonconformities provision at the very beginning that applies throughout the regulations. So here, even though there is not a specific nonconformities clause in
Mhm.
section 3205, the general one applies.
okay,
Meaning that somebody who has used that outdoor storage display location for decades can continue using it as long as they don't expand it beyond the historic
okay.
space.
So a place is being built. We can go back to the Caledonia Spirits. So they would have come to you and said, this is what our plan is for a display and for our storage
For outdoors,
for
yeah,
outdoor
that would have been part of the site
original
plan. Yep.
But then after 2 years, they want to add different displays. But it's no longer under this section. They're coming to you under some other section because they already exist now. It's not,
Well, no, but it's a change.
okay.
So if they want to move where their outdoor storage location is, they need to come back because it's part of their site plan. This is what we're doing. If they're then making changes to that, then it's a change from
To the site plan.
to the site plan from what they've already agreed and was approved as part of the permit. And
There-
that's something that is regulated for their type of use and parcel.
And you said
Is-
that's in perpetuity?
Yeah, it never expires.
I mean, the permit just runs with the land. It doesn't matter who owns it unless
Yeah.
somebody comes and changes the permit and gets rid of that outdoor storage location altogether. Right, but then somebody starts to use it again. Oh, you gotta get a new permit.
Yeah.
So if Abishan changes hands, does the new business owner still have the non-conforming use?
If it's still a retail use,
Okay,
right? A new restaurant steps into an existing restaurant,
right.
it's the same use. They don't need a permit. They can keep doing everything the prior owners did.
Hmm.
And I mean, retail would be the use that has that outdoor display for sale.
Right.
Like there's a continuing range of what is retail. I mean, that's the similarly, was it the original medical dispensary that got permitted as just retail, Mike? Out
I
off River Street?
believe they got permitted as medical.
medical office. But I mean, the current public dispensaries that aren't medical. They're just retail for zoning purposes.
Okay, it's very complicated.
Once you have a site
The
plan
idea of
approved,
like this like site plan just
once
exists.
you have the site plan approved, it's not as complicated as you think, because you now have something on paper. And if it changes, there'll be an area that'll say, okay, approved for display, approved for storage. And if it changes, it doesn't matter if you're storing gin barrels or pallets for something. I mean, if it's outdoor storage, it's outdoor storage. So if the use changes, those areas are still designated as that. But if you come in and say, I don't need that space, I would rather use it for X, it's like, okay, well, that's a change of your site plan. You come in and get a permit, maybe an administrative permit, just to adjust your site plan to your new use, because you're now doing something that's slightly different. It's not as complicated once you've got a map.
Yeah, and it's considered sort of an accessory use, right? So, because a manufacturer who has to have a lot of wood coming in for whatever
Right.
they're building is going to need storage for that wood. Maybe it's under a structure, but maybe it's an outdoor area for part of the time. So the what's the name? The people who truck the porta potties,
Right. Yeah,
right?
keep thinking-
They had to have an outdoor storage area designated.
Right.
That's outdoor storage that's separate from their parking lots, even though they're really adjacent to each other.
Mhm.
That's a location for the outdoor storage. If suddenly they want to rework it and shift stuff around, they've got to come to me. If a different business took that over, the areas that are currently storage for porta potties could be storage for
Right.
something else, and that would be fine.
These folks that went through a DRB process to begin with, but then they're making these minor adjustments.
Hmm.
Are you allowed to approve those, or do they have to go back to the DRB?
Depends on what it is. So it depends on the,
Down here.
that's in the procedures section.
Oh, okay.
But wait, if there's a very specific condition that the development review board has written into their decision that approved the initial permit, the board has the option to say, hey, you have to come back to us to change this. There's avenues for me to make changes prior to permits issued under DRB decisions. If it's a minor amendment that doesn't go to any of the conditions and wasn't otherwise something that was why it went to the DRB in the first place. Or
Well, that's okay. We're going to get to that at some point.
to me to do just somehow doesn't otherwise trigger the DRB.
Yeah.
But that's why being able to look back at prior permits, prior DRB decisions for a particular project is important.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we've got two of these left. One of them is one that we have tried to remove a number of times. So solar shading is still here, but in a much reduced sense. So now solar shading only affects existing or proposed solar devices. So you have to, if there's an existing or solar or proposed, and that we should probably go through and maybe adjust that to be permitted or something to that effect. Proposed, I guess, could be somebody's put in an application for it. Then you can't impact it with your new building. So you can't create shade over top of that solar device. So it used to be a much bigger process, and Gabe had to go through it for one of his projects, and it was always a problem, always something we as staff didn't like, but it continued to have a life of its own. And but it is whether this stays or goes, at least now it's to a limited extent because it's only looking at existing and proposed solar devices.
What does proposed mean in that?
Well, that's what he was saying, that it doesn't say, so which is why do we say it has to be permitted but isn't
Okay.
built yet,
Permitted.
or there's been an application submitted, which would help, prevent like revenge, like, hey, I don't want that solar stuff there, so I'm gonna build this big thing. But the other thing to note is that this section only applies for major site plan review
Right.
in specific zoning districts. And because you've expanded minor site plan already, that's already reduced the number of times that this would come into play. So like right now with Gabe, with your prior project, it wouldn't have qualified as a major site plan, so this wouldn't have come into play at all.
I mean, the language that changed, I mean, it probably should be permitted or something, but when I was like in the throes of this, trying to figure it out, I read a Supreme Court decision from the state of California. I know obviously it's different law, but there was the neighborhood battle about this issue, and the Supreme Court holding was that it's like, look, if they are, inhibiting your ability to collect off of panels that you've got or you're building or something, that's one thing, but you can't just come in here and say, well, I might build panels or I have passive solar in my, garden or something. It's like, look, you have to actually have made an investment they're impacting. So I think that was a great change, Mike. I'm glad you championed it through.
I wonder if this could also be another area for flexibility in terms of like the offsets, like you're saying, if someone's taking down a tree in a current landscape, that they could pay it back by adding a tree somewhere else. Could there be language here that if they are going to shade an existing solar panel, that they'd be willing to purchase solar elsewhere for that user?
The irony of this is that this actually doesn't apply to trees. This only applies to buildings. So you could plant a tree and shade their solar device, but you can't build the building that would shade the solar device.
I wasn't talking about, I was saying earlier, Gabe had mentioned trees as like an offset opportunity. I wonder here if we could use something similar, that if someone is going to be shading an existing solar device, that the developer would be willing to like rebuild the solars to be elsewhere, or provide some other solution other than just construction cannot happen here.
I think that this section actually looks pretty good if as an alternative to it not existing at all. Having it be 6 months out of the year between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Makes this like very easy to comply with, and the fact that the entire downtown is exempt,
Right.
is good. So yeah, like I would say, if we can't get rid of it, I think it's pretty inoffensive.
That's true. The 10 to 2 does make a big difference. It used to be December 21st. So it used to be, it used to be insane. And the other adjustment. So this probably, as you say, probably is a good compromise and probably works pretty well at this point. Which leads us to the last section, which is design and compatibility. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of conversation about this. This only applies to major site plan. And anyone who goes through design review is exempt. So this is where, when we were talking about in part 2, we had those architectural standards. This is where those architectural standards would actually apply. And I know we've had a lot of discussion about character of the area, whether those architectural standards, and this also gets to the point when we were talking, when we were saying at the start, you really need to understand the whole zoning to understand how the pieces fit together. This is one of those places where this applies because of part 2, and this is where they all kind of fit together. So it doesn't come up very often, And the more we make things not a major site plan, so the fact that we have pulled 6 units and under out of major site plan means these won't apply for any smaller projects. This will be if somebody's building a 20 or 30 unit housing project, then we're going to start getting into some architectural standards to make sure it has a certain amount of design and consistency and form and massing. And again, here is talking about typical of the neighborhood. You have all pointed out, and everybody has pointed out, that's actually not the standard we want. We actually want to have a future-based standard in there that says that meets X. And I think we just need to make sure that if we're going to keep these standards, that we have a future-based and not looking just at what's there today, but really looking at what we would want to have there in the future or to allow there in the future. And then we've got the compatibility, and maybe that goes away. Maybe we don't have compatibility when we have future neighborhood standards. The materials, the windows, the energy, the service areas. So that's a lot of this. I don't believe we get a lot of these, but Meredith going to get and talk about those a little bit.
Mike, what was the first thing you said about did you say this is outside of design review?
Yes.
Correct. If a project is in design review, it's exempt from this requirement.
Because it's going to go through the design review standards.
Right, which makes sense, and I'm seeing what I feel to be a lot of overlap. So
Right. So I think this was put in because there was a sense that if it wasn't in design review and it's a really big project, the original drafters wanted there to be some review of that, either compatibility or how it relates to the street. That's what these sort of come into, and to still being able to look at whether it fits with the neighborhood it's in, which to me seems like you're duplicating design review. So why not just expand design review?
yeah,
Personally.
yeah. And
You know, but there are things in here that aren't in design review. So the requirements about, you know, some bits about localize, you know, having your service areas. And that could be maybe something that is carved out. That is one of the ones that pops up in here that does seem like a more practical item that gets triggered.
Yeah.
It does pop up a little bit in screening in the landscaping. There's some landscaping screening specific to service areas. This is one that is more about the location of them and minimizing like noise and lights, things like that, and where things are actually located. But a lot of the rest of it is very duplicative of design review.
Yeah, it sort of feels like a small quasi design review outside of that design review zone.
Right, by the DRB that does not have training in that.
Right.
Unlike the design review committee.
Right. Can you think of an example of a development that's fallen into this category?
Yeah, so the place that has that does the servicing of porta potties.
Yeah.
They had to go through this.
Is that what they're? I forget.
Yeah, something like that. Wind River. It was Wind River. Then they changed their name, I think, or vice versa.
It's across from the Ford ship.
So they had to go through this.
Got it. That makes sense because they're outside of that zone.
Yeah.
But they're of a major site plan.
Yes.
That requires this.
Yeah. So they had to do this. The new, I want to say the new storage unit building that's right near the car wash had to do this, but most of it didn't apply.
Yeah.
Because it's storage units buildings.
But it's also interesting to think about like what is compatibility to the Ford dealership.
Yeah. And I am going to say that it was very much give us a coherent argument for most of these.
Yeah, which makes sense from a planning department perspective. But then when it comes to I don't know, when it comes to, let's say, the DRB or
That's what I'm saying is at their approval level, it was like, give us,
yeah,
have an architect who can talk to this in what seems like a coherent, intelligent way, and nobody is disputing it, and so we're gonna approve it.
right. I think the issues though is when there are those disputes.
Yeah.
Okay, now the rubber hits the road. It becomes a very complicated situation, in my opinion.
It becomes a way to potentially defeat things or appeal things because they're not great standards.
Yep.
And you don't have the kinds of really clear standards that are in the design review regulations that you can then also point back to federal standards or other guidance. Like that's why we have really detailed guidelines. It gives a fallback.
Yeah.
And this does not have any of that. I mean, this is one of the parts where I write a staff report and I'm like, okay, board, here you go.
I mean,
Make a decision because I don't have anything to give you other than what's in the application from the architect.
Yeah, I mean, so it seems to me like, to the extent that I've been to the DRB, that if you're able to make an opinion, it's really easy. But when you put it on their shoulders, it's really hard, right? So in your view, what should happen here?
Oof.
I mean, we're trying to get more housing, right?
Yeah, I don't like this section. I really don't like this section. But I mean, I understand why it's here. But I don't feel very comfortable with it. My lawyer brain says, I don't know how defensible most of this is.
If we removed it, what's the downside? Well, if we said, look, the design review, whether we expand it or not, right? The design review is where we really want to have that control. And wherever that doesn't exist, we remove this. What does that do to you?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I would keep, I think the energy clause might be something that's statutorily required. I think some of the service area bits might be good to move somewhere else or have its own little bit. But a lot of the rest of this, to me, it's just trying to piggyback on in a not good way onto design review.
So design review
people
should
really want this. Yeah, and especially because right now in design review, there's no residential density. So if people really want want this kind of review and a review of architectural standards, okay, then go with design review. In which case you're looking at both a narrower view and a broader view. You're looking at the district, but you're also looking at what's right next to it versus saying we have this neighborhood and anything you build there has to fit with the architectural standards of that neighborhood. In some ways, that's more restrictive than the design review federal guidelines, which are if you put something really new next to a bunch of historic buildings, basically do your best to somehow reflect, or as one of my people says, like, doff your cap to some of the nearby buildings. But otherwise, if it's a brand new building, great, like do something new. You want it to look new. You don't want it to look.
Yeah, we're planning for the future.
Yeah.
Mike, you have a similar opinion? Like we don't lose much by striking this and just really thinking hard about where design review should be?
Yeah, I mean, when I was just reading through this today without thinking, haven't thought through it a lot, because I know there was a conversation about the design review district being too big. It also could be interesting to think if we had two design review districts with the same requirements, but one is the narrow one that, because we look at it and it covers all the way out through
National Life.
But if we were to go through and say that everything needs a permit in this area, or everything needs design review in this tight area, but the reason we've always had problems expanding it into Liberty Street and Loomis Street and College Street is because people in single family homes didn't want to get design review for those little things. But if we had two design review districts, one that's everything in this district needs it, and any major site plan in this bigger area,
Oh,
which could be the rest of the town,
interesting.
could be anything in the rest of the town that's a major site plan, also has to go through design review. And it follows the same rules. But if you're a single family, two family, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're never going to be a major site plan and therefore never have to go through these requirements. But once you get to multifamily housing of 15 units or whatever it is, you may have to go through design review because of these requirements. But we will have to have that conversation. Do you then have that exemption from the density as well? And that's just a question. I haven't thought about the consequences of that. Maybe we don't need to worry about the density because the parking requirements and all these other pieces are going to come into play. But it's something we would have to think about a little bit and think about the unintended consequences of what might happen. But it's an interesting way of looking at it. If we broke it into two districts of a tight one that's like everything, big and small, has to go through, just like it does today, has to go through design review. If you're outside of that major site plan, only major site plans would have to go through design review. But it's the same board. You still have to go to DRC. The same trained staff are still going to have to look at it with the same standards. And then you wouldn't need this extra layer and you wouldn't need those architectural standards.
That's interesting.
And you could still carve out like the rural district or something like that if you wanted to, where things are much more spaced out.
I could see you being like really tight and at the historic overlay. And then, we could consider how much you want to expand. I mean, I think if we still have R9 when this is all done, I mean, those more suburban, I don't want I don't want to deal with it. I don't want other people having to, like, oh, we're doing X. I know it's major site plan, but I don't know, there's a lot of things that can trigger major site plan.
That's the one where it has to be like a new primary building or the 2000. There haven't been many major site plans in my
Right. I know, but I'm
time here.
And I think
Yeah.
that stuff wouldn't fall under this because the way we're breaking it up, but I wouldn't want anybody to act like it should.
Yeah.
When the DRC folks were here and talking with us, I remember them chatting about expanding the design review zone to basically the gateways. So the corridors coming into Montpelier north. Primarily, I remember hearing Elm Street north, and then off the highway, and then coming in from Gallison Hill, basically. Anyway, I could imagine those spaces being in this second category of design review, and again, keeping design review to the core, the current one to the core, expanding a secondary one in those directions.
Would that be more of a hardship for developers if 3207 is taken away and now instead of having to go to DRB with this, they have to go to the DRC? Is that more of a hardship for them?
I don't think so. I mean, you might have to provide more specifications for your specifics. It's not more of a hardship than keeping this standard that's in here right now.
Okay.
And honestly, getting them before the design review committee, in my mind, gives them an opportunity to talk to a pool of experts who can give them guidance, including sometimes, no, go see this supplier for this point. They're going to be able to get you a better, even sometimes priced item for your project. And it's all within the same, we have the meeting set up so that usually going to the design review committee doesn't lengthen you're getting your approval from the DRB. And this would only be major site plan, right? For that additional area. So you'd already be going to the development review board anyway. So we fit in the design review committee meeting during the public hearing notice period. So it doesn't lengthen the process at all.
Okay.
And I mean, it adds $100 to the fees right now.
Would it give members of the public more say than they currently do?
I mean, they can attend the meetings.
The DRC,
Yeah, I mean, the only
their public
notice.
input component to DRC meetings?
I mean, they get to make comments. We have to let them make comments.
Yeah.
But it's not appealable until it gets to the DRB decision.
Okay.
The only person who in that interim phase can say, I don't agree with what the DRC is doing,
Right.
is actually the applicant. In the interim, they can immediately go, no, I disagree with the DRC. I want to fight it at my DRB meeting. But in that particular scenario where you have to go to DRC and then go to DRB,
Right.
I think I mean, it's one more meeting night. I mean, this is my viewpoint. I think it's a benefit. And you also get, the other thing is you get to have that first round. And so if something gets spotted earlier, you have time to change it before your DRB meeting in 2 more weeks. And then come to the DRB with a slightly revised application.
Yeah, at some point when we come back.
Prepared for the pushback when you come to the DRB. If somebody came to the DRC first and you already got this pushback, you have 2 more weeks to prepare to be able to argue against that before the DRB.
When we come back around and start looking in detail, I'm sure you know the fact pattern. It's not worth getting into right now, but I know that, is it 21 units that Lucky's trying to build and it got held up at the I mean, he's got an apartment building he's trying to build on Elm Street. They got held up at the DRC.
No, I do not have an application from him. I suggested he have an informal meeting with some of the Historic Preservation Commission members because the project he wants to do involves tearing down a historic structure. He has to have expert input about the historic integrity of the building. That can come from his own historic experts that he hires, or he has the opportunity to get input from the Historic Preservation Commission members, wasn't DRC,
Okay.
for free to get their input. And if they're in support of his project, he can just go with that when he moves forward for the permit process to demolish in whole or part that building. So he had one meeting with them, and I haven't heard from Lucky directly since, other than I reached out to him last week to say, hey, we want to get this rolling because it's going to be a process. You're the second or third person who's told me that it's held stuff
That's
up.
that's
So-
that's what I thought I had heard, is that the DRC.
I've
Yeah.
heard that from other people
So-
too. The design review committee has not
It's not-
given,
Okay.
they
I was missing.
they have not seen a thing because I don't have an application. If he wants to go before them informally, he can.
Yeah.
He's welcome to, but the informal meeting with the Historic Preservation Commission, who wrote the design review regulations.
Yeah. Good job.
But yeah, no, that hasn't, sorry, I'm I keep hearing from people that our permitting is holding them up, and no, it's not. He got some informal feedback from them on what they would like to see.
I
But
heard
that's
about the
not,
feed-
but they don't,
that's
but
a-
they
that's
don't,
a
but they don't, but they don't make the decision.
Right.
Right? They don't make the decision.
You just hear about 21 units and you're like, yeah, let's, but then it's not the full story, obviously. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry for the sidebar.
No, I think it's interesting to hear how this is like playing out in the real world.
Yeah.
So is that it?
That's
That
it.
is it.
Oh, okay.
Hope you feel better, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for showing up.
Yeah, at this point it sounds worse and I'm losing my voice, so I don't have much left.
Oh. So are there any other final questions for Mike or Meredith?
What are we doing next?
Adjournment.
No, I mean, what are we reviewing next one?
Conditional use is the next chapter. Chapter 330 is conditional uses.
Okay.
But we can probably do other things because it's the shortest chapter there is. So we'll probably lump it in with something else.
And the one after that would be planned unit developments and subdivision. Or the
Oh, yeah, that one.
340 and
That one.
350.
Okay, so 340 is pretty big too.
Yeah, I don't think Mike likes 340.
No, I don't think a lot of us like 240.
Well, I think the big thing with 340 is just that it is, people like to get a little bit too cute. And so they come up with ideas for, planned unit developments and how we can do these things. And the reality is nobody does them. And I would rather make rules that say you can do this rather than planned unit developments are like, we're going to make less than ideal and then give you incentives to do something ideal instead of just making it possible. Because the general rule is developers are going to take the easiest path to get their projects done. And planned unit developments by their design are more complicated. And so you want people to do cottage clusters, but nobody's going to do them because that's actually more complicated than just building a bunch of small houses, which would look just like a cottage cluster.
Right.
So why not just let them build a whole bunch of small houses that look like a cottage cluster and make it easy for them? So that's always been my issue. You do need the few PUDs because you do want to allow the ability to cluster, and you do want to allow these ability to do condominiums. That's why there's certain general PUDs and
I feel like that one
those.
could take a couple of nights, but I think it's worth our time. I mean, one of the things I live up, near the college, and one of the things I did not participate. Thank you, all you guys who dealt with all of that stuff a couple of years ago. But I think I think we should understand that. Like, what came out of that? What was the community feedback? That's one of the PUDs, right? Is this college campus? Is that what it's called?
Yep, college campus. It was, I think, designed mostly for Vermont College of Fine Arts, but it could also come into play for something like CCV.
It was just really emotional. It's like, okay, so let's take some feedback from that, and how can we simplify it? I think that's everything, right? How do we make everybody's lives simpler and get more housing, and preserve the stuff that's beautiful here, but make some new stuff.
And that campus PUD replaced a much worse system that existed before then. So yeah, if you talk to people who had worked with the college before 2018, the old one was really bad. They would have to do a PUD and it would expire every 5 years, and they would have to go and do more community work to get it reapproved as a master plan. It was a nightmare. Everything was in non-conforming use. So yeah, it was really, the new system may still have its hiccups, but it's a lot smoother, cleaner, faster than the old system was.
So I would move to adjourn if we don't have anything else.
Yeah, and so, next meeting we'll plan on doing 3:30 and then start 3:40. It sounds like 3:40 will be big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Mike and I are both nodding.
Okay. Okay. So, does anyone move to adjourn?
I do.
Has anybody seconded? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're adjourned.